through November 9th in Washington. More at kidseurofestival.org.
It's 1:45.
Welcome back to Metro Connection. I'm Rebecca Shear, and this week we're diving into local politics with a show we're calling The Ballot Box. One of the issues that consistently shapes politics in D.C. is education, and the question of how to improve public schools, long considered among the worst in the nation. This election season, one of the biggest points of discussion among the mayoral candidates is whether to change school boundaries.
I will not support a plan, and I do not think a plan is ready if it exacerbates educational inequality.
Diversity is very important, but what is also important is making sure our schools are absolutely resourced.
I'm not going to allow Brown versus Board of Education to go backwards on my watch.
Those were D.C.'s top three mayoral candidates at a recent debate: Carol Schwartz, David Catania, and Muriel Bowser. Now, the reality about many D.C. schools is they've long been separated along race and class lines. Kavitha Cardoza and Jacob Benston bring us this story on how they got that way and what it could mean for the future.
We're outside Sousa Middle School in southeast DC. It's a regular-looking 1950s-era red brick building.
But this school was once an education battleground. In September 1950, 11 black students tried to enroll in what was then an all-white school.
Back then, DC schools were segregated by law and were not equal.
The students were turned away, but they took their case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in 1954, the court ruled in their favor. The ruling in the case Bowling v. Sharp came the same day the court struck down segregation in the rest of the country in Brown v. Board of Education.
But today, the school is still not integrated. Now, 99% of students here are African American. There are no white students.
So in some ways, things haven't changed so much in the 60 years since desegregation. In 2005, one local group issued a report looking at what exactly had changed in the years since 1954. I talked to Rod Boggs. He's executive director of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, the group behind the report.
Unfortunately, the conclusions were, and I think they're pretty well documented, was that if you had to really look at the education the average child in the city was getting, particularly an African-American child, the education was considerably inferior to what was being offered during the era of segregation.
Some of the very basics were missing, like safe school buildings. At one point, there were close to 6,000 fire code violations at schools.
I talked with one school principal who's very familiar with buildings like that. Maria Takeba is the longest-serving principal in DCPS, 34 years. She founded Columbia Heights Education Campus because of the inequities she saw in the education system.
There were very low expectations for African American and Latino students, and this was reflected in the number of students who were taking any kind of college preparatory courses, the number of students who were in higher level math courses.
Her first school recruits were poor minority students who were pushed out or were on the verge of dropping out of other DCPS high schools. She says school buildings all over the city were crumbling, including hers.
Well, we never had a building when we first started. We were given little spaces in other buildings, and we had to move about 4 times in the space of 5 years. And when we finally got a building, it was one that had been built in the early 1900s that didn't have a gymnasium, didn't have a cafeteria.
In 2007, Columbia Heights Education Campus got a brand new facility. Takeba is trying to level the playing field academically as well.